Okay, going to go through the miscellaneous component drawings this time around. All the commands that I couldn't think of another place or their own category for. So we got things like hatch and what else we go through? Ellipse, I think. Array. Array's pretty cool. Yeah, so just those three. Oh, and stretch. So the first command we're going to go through is hatch at the moment, and I'll need to open the ribbon in order to use hatch. If I have the ribbon closed, it pops up with a very large menu that at the resolution I'm running won't actually fit on the screen. To use hatch, the command is just H. Simple as that. And what hatch does is it fills in an area, and you can put a pattern in that area. So at the moment I've just got this pattern is set to solid, but I can change the pattern up here. Hatch pattern, there we go. So I can pick some other hatch pattern. So I might want to go for that one or something. So click inside an area when you want that to be hatched, and you'll notice that some areas I could try and click here, but that's not it's not going to determine a closed boundary. So I can only hatch areas that are entirely closed. And when we're finished with that command, hit spacebar, and you can see these little red circles will hang around until we hit regenerate. What have we got here? Okay, so this is just explaining, this panel just talks about changing a hatch pattern. So once we've got, this has already got a hatch pattern here, this is a concrete pattern. Clicking on the hatch pattern, you'll see that we can select what it currently is, and the panel asks to change to ANS 131. This is also for students of NCORE 1010. This is the pattern that we'll use most often when sectioning things, because it's a nice default, just striped pattern like that. Still doesn't look very good, does it? What we can also do, in addition to changing the pattern of the hatch, we can change the scale. So this little area here is the scale, and we can bump that up to a solid 1. So now that the spacing comes a bit better. You can either change these things such as pattern, scale and angle through the ribbon, or you can change them through properties as well. So you can make changes to the pattern type here and all the rest of it. Okay, the last thing the panel asks to do is to change the angle. So we can try and pick some angle that's going to look good. You might want to go for 90, or I think it might look best at 45 in this area. So now we've got a nice, easy to distinguish hatch pattern that can clearly show that we're filling in that area. Okay, so this seems like it's a pretty straightforward panel. What are we doing? We're hatching this box. I click inside. See, the box looked closed to a casual observer, but it wasn't until we tried to hatch it that we've got a hole has become visible. So AutoCAD will tell us when there's got these holes, and it tells us with these little red circles. So what we can do is we can simply close the hole with extend and get rid of those circles with regen. Now we can hatch it in there. So that now works. So when there are misclosures like that, you'll get a red circle telling you what to do. And as I mentioned here as well, you can make the red circles go away with regenerate. Hatch also gives us an area. So we've got a tricky shape here. If you were going to work out the area of this shape from first principles, I don't doubt that a savvy person could do it. It would just take a bit of time. AutoCAD, however, very quickly tells us in the properties of this hatch what the area is. And so according to the panel, we should find it to be 622.4, and that's exactly what we get. I'll leave that there. Now, this panel talks about the way that hatches are grouped together. In the first panel, even though I had all of these hatches in different areas, when I click one of them, it selects them all, and it gives us one big area for all of those hatches. If we wanted to individually know what the area of all of these circles were, or assuming they were more complicated shapes, what we needed to know the area of footpath growth, or of a new depth of asphalt or something on a road, what you'd need to do is click, exit the hatch with spacebar, start a new hatch. And if you keep doing this, you can fill all of these little circles with their own individual hatch patterns. So you can select them individually, I can move them individually, I can find out their areas individually. If we don't do that, if we do this sort of thing, then I can try and move this circle here, but it does that sort of thing, which is a bit of a pain. So yeah, that's just saying that the hatches are all grouped together unless otherwise specified, or unless broken apart. Array. Array is one of my favorite commands. It's very useful. The interface has changed a lot since, I'll close the ribbon now. The interface has changed a lot since 2011. It used to be a sort of pop-up menu that would come in and you could make an array from there. But now it's mostly graphical. So in this case what we're going to do is we're going to fill out the ranks of these pawns with the array command. So I'm going to select the pawn first and then hit array. You could also type array and then select the pawn, it doesn't really matter. Now what kind of array do we want? In this case I want a rectangular array. Then we'll come to what a polar array is in a minute, and I don't think I'm going to go through path arrays at all. So the first thing is where are we arraying to, or how many units are we asking for really? So I guess we're asking for close to this many items. We could specify that we want 8 items with the keyboard, but we can also just run out to that snap point. And now the array command is asking for the spacing on these items. So specify opposite corner to space items. We've got some center lines on this rook. We can use the center lines to finish our array, and now all the pawns are nice and neat. I'll do the same with the bottom. Rectangular array out to here, spacing aligned with the rook. And in the past when you arrayed objects, they would come out as a group of individual objects, whereas now they are one big block. But the block, it's actually kind of helpful in that we can, we'll see in the next panel why it is that the block allows us to make changes to the array after we've made it, which was never a thing you could do in the past. But if for whatever reason you want to say I wanted to now play a game of chess, I can explode these arrays. Now I can select the individual chess pieces and make my opening move. So yeah, that's all. That's just with explode. Good old Channel 9. Haven't watched TV in quite a while, but I still remember a logo that could be easily arrayed. I will need the ribbon back open for this. So a rectangular array doesn't just have to be in a line, it can also be in a sort of box. So I'm going to drag this out to, how many do I want? Now I need 3 in this array. But the spacing of them is going to be the tricky part. How far spaced do we need them to be? Let's say I click somewhere like that, which it really is obviously not the correct spacing. How far should it be spaced apart? Well, here we've got 11.25 units in either direction. So when I click on this array, I've got the properties of the array coming up here, and I can see that the column spacing, this area here is column spacing, that should be 11.25. And what about the row spacing? Row spacing should also be 11.25. You can see that when I change these values, it automatically updates the overall spacing. And what happens if I change these, I wonder? Okay, so that if I change the total number of rows, it puts 2 more on top at the same spacing. But yeah, so now with that, that's the correct array. This is one of my favorites. So I can say array again, and select these objects. Now this time we're talking about a polar array. We're going to array these objects around the center point of this array, and the number of items that we need, if you read the tips in this panel, says 5 items. So I'm going to type 5 with the keyboard. And what angle are we going through? It looks so cool. Never used to do this, that's why I like it. We're going through 360 degrees. If you do things correctly, and I'm not sure how many people will recognize this pop culture reference, but you can see it all lines up. If you do the right thing, you get this pentagon nested within a pentagon nested within a pentagon kind of thing. Okay, so that's array, both rectangular and polar arrays. Again, this array is one solid object, and we can change the properties of it. Can we change it through in here? Yes, we can. So we can change the fill angle, the number of items, and so on. Or we could change it through the ribbon if the ribbon was open. Stretch command. Turn off hints. And wait until CAD loads. So stretch is carried out with just S, and this is one of those commands that is really, really handy, but takes a bit of practice to see the right ways to use it. So I can grab all of this here, and being mindful of where I grab to, I want, in the panel I've tried to describe that you should get this green selection box to completely encase the circle, but not to touch the outside edges. So we want to get somewhere between the edge of the circle and that other edge there. So this edge over here in this circle. When I'm in the right spot, I can click, and I can say, yes, those are the objects I want to select. Specify some base point, and now I can stretch these lines around to any other point. I could just stretch them horizontally, and say put this object over here. I could say no, I don't want it there anymore. I want to move it somewhere in the middle. Yeah, but there are many options. I mean, you can move this sort of wherever you like. Whoops! As long as you stretch from the right objects, then you can go to wherever you want. It's kind of like a slingshot now. It's actually very handy. When I was making these panels, I used it a few times because I needed to move these whole objects around, but I didn't want to, move the line and then trim a line and then extend the line and so on. I can just grab the whole thing, click and drag it. I mean, Excel struggles a bit to run a command with so many objects in it, but it will live. And you can use these stretchy lines like that. Okay, ellipse. Ellipse doesn't come up much, but when you want to draw an ellipse, there's nothing else that will do. So the first thing we want is an axis endpoint. So these are the long axes, I guess. You could do this panel two ways. So I could say, here's one endpoint, here's another endpoint, and here is the distance to the second axis. Or I could say, here's one endpoint, another endpoint, and here's the distance to the other axis. Either way, it's the same. We're making, I suppose, 3 clicks to define this ellipse. One axis and a second axis. But yeah, that's a good command. And now this last one is a little tricky. It's a special case of an ellipse called an ISO circle. That is a circle drawn in an isometric view. To do this, we need to have grid on, and we also need to change the settings in grid. So to do that now, I'll right click on the grid, open settings, and I need to change snap and grid. I need to change this setting here, the snap type, to isometric. With that changed, with isometric snap on, I don't actually have to turn snap on, but you can see that the spacing on the grid has changed. My cursor has changed as well. My cursor is now in an isometric aspect, whereas before it was in a rectangular aspect. So in order to get my ISO circle to be drawn correctly, I need to change the orientation of the cursor. So at the moment, it's kind of like my cursor is aligned with this top face. I can press F5 to rotate the cursor. Now I'm aligned with, yes, I'm aligned with the face I need. It's aligned with the center lines that I've drawn. But I can keep pressing F5 to rotate through these. And once I come to the right one and that lines up, I say, yep, I'm ready to draw my ISO circle. So as I said, an ISO circle is not actually a circle, it's a special case of an ellipse. So to start up the ellipse command, and down the bottom in the commands we can see we've got a few different options, an arc, center, or ISO. So if we hit I for ISO circle, now we've got the options to make that. So we specify the center first, and what's the radius? 5 units. Now we've drawn our ISO circle. Using this command doesn't take a great deal of practice. I suppose it's once you've got the general habit of it, it's pretty easy, and it draws very nice circles. I mean, if you ever tried to draw an isometric circle by hand, you'll know that it is an utter pain, and that this way is much more preferable. Well, that's all that there is for this particular panel or set of panels. The next one is puzzle, and for obvious reasons I'm not going to make a video for puzzle, but I wish you all the best of luck in that, and I'll see you in the next video for line types. Thanks for watching.